let's come together in a thought. Think about for a moment the vague and unique sense of dread we feel when we know we are about to embark upon something meaningful but difficult. You might imagine a sensation of destiny, of purpose, perhaps even a sense of willingness and resignation. No road was ever built without challenge, without trees or boulders or rivers trying to hold themselves against progress. Roads are built with purpose and intent, far surpassing the concern over obstacles. A new way will be made. Today is Palm Sunday, and we rejoice in the idea that positive change is on the horizon. It is not without hardship, but all the more valuable for the sacrifice made on its behalf. As we light our chalice, take its flame into your heart. Shine it outward like a beacon, loving and filled with wisdom so profound our minds cannot comprehend it, but our hearts do so easily. May its light find its way into the darkest crevices and bring lasting peace to this troubled world. Amen. What does it feel like to watch the beginning of the movie Titanic, knowing how it's going to end? Titanic, watching the passengers board the gangplank with their carry-on luggage in hand, thrilled at the prestige of climbing aboard the most luxurious and famous ship in the world. Personally, I recognize myself as I watch it, a glimmer of hope that maybe this time they'll survive. Somehow the ship won't sink. Somehow the lovers will go off into the sunset as they deserve. Am I the only one who hears this little voice of hope despite all logical knowledge to the contrary? I mean, we all know how it ends. It's not a surprise to us. There's no spoiler here. But it's hard watching the happy, expectant faces of the doomed passengers who don't know what they don't know. Today is Palm Sunday. It's the beginning of the Christian Holy Week. It commemorates the final days of the life of Jesus Christ and his controversial ministry. The week also honors the traditional belief that he rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion and reconciled the world to God in the process. We have the luxury here of exploring these beliefs and asking them questions, allowing some parts of the story to sit respectfully off to the side and others to come forward and teach us. We do not now, nor will we ever know for certain what really happened in those 8 days. But we cannot base our faith on what we disbelieve. We can only base it on what we have here and now, right in front of us. And what we have here and now is the story which humanity has carried forward for some reason. And for that reason alone, we should be curious about it. We should assume that the story has value that supersedes the dogma which carries the message around like a jewel-encrusted bottle. It's because we have carried it for so long that we should consider being respectful of what it's trying to say. There may be value here still. In hindsight, it appears that the radical actions of Jesus were taken deliberately in those final days. At any time, Jesus could have fled, laid low, or never even entered the city in the first place. He had to know his presence in Jerusalem during Passover would be dangerous. He'd just very publicly resurrected someone from the dead, apparently just 2 days before, and only 2 miles away. It's worth mentioning that Jesus knew a little something about self-promotion and human nature. At first, his tactic was to tell the people he healed to keep it to themselves. Don't tell anyone, knowing full well that would only attract more attention. A shrewd promoter knows a good secret moves faster than a sunbeam. But when he publicly raised Lazarus from the dead, just 2 days before entering the city, he did it deliberately, like blasting a horn from the outside of the gates. In fact, he waited a bit until Lazarus actually died before going to him. Jesus knew he was sick. Lazarus' sisters had asked Jesus to come days before, while there was still time. But in the story, Jesus deliberately waited until he died so that he could raise him, not heal him. He purposefully waited to come until Lazarus had been buried 4 days, a full day past the number Jesus had already enigmatically told his disciples that he himself would rise again after his own death. Jesus waited to raise Lazarus until after he had passed the point of no return, so that there would be no question of who Jesus was and of what he was capable. Rome could never duplicate these acts, no matter how much power they convinced themselves they had through their riches, weapons, and displays. Jesus had remained calculatingly discreet about his powers and teachings up until then, keeping them going in a tantalizing, steady drip of potential and wonder, letting them all see slowly, at the speed of their comprehension, one miracle at a time, one teaching at a time, until they were ready to understand for themselves. Now, I have to say here that there's no proof that any of these miracles actually occurred. But I can say that there are stories like this throughout human history. Unexplained and miraculous events occur all the time, many times at the hands of a noteworthy person known for their talents in this area. I think it's just as arrogant to steadfastly demand that everyone believe in miracles as much as it would be arrogant to say that they are impossible to have occurred. So let's try to retain a sense of humility when thinking for or against the literal interpretation of these stories. The point here is that we be mindful of the fact that these stories have been carried down generation after generation, which means that people before us deeply believed in their ability to communicate something of value to us. Out of respect for our ancestors, we must examine the contents of their time capsules. There's an old tale that the Caribbean natives, upon the arrival of Christopher Columbus's ships for the first time, couldn't actually see the ships as they crested the horizon because the natives had no mental framework for the concept of ship. Aside from the dubious notion it was Columbus's ships making the first discovery, all the native Caribbeans could see at first was the waves the ships made, not the ships themselves. A shaman, a holy man, was supposedly the first to actually see what was creating the waves and then helped the other people to see it too. They needed a guide. Jesus is presenting himself in much the same way as he proceeds through his short 3-year ministry. At first, the people can only see the waves until he shows them, at their own rate of comprehension, the enormous vessel breaking the surface of the water. And then they see, and they can't unknow. As Jesus prepared to enter the city of Jerusalem, Passover was about to begin in the Jewish world. The Roman authorities were always on high alert during Passover. This is when the city became a potential tinderbox. Even the slightest sign of a Jewish revolt, protest, or uprising against the Roman occupation was dealt with swiftly, harshly, and publicly. The Jewish people still hold this week of Passover as sacred. It's a celebration of their freedom from tyranny, their release from slavery in Egypt. Rome worried any one of them might get ideas and use Passover as an opportunity to declare their freedom from Rome. It wouldn't take much to set them off. As a show of power, Rome often held grand military parades entering through the dramatic main gate of the city in the west. Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, but didn't live in Jerusalem. He preferred the seaside town of Caesarea. He only came to the heated political and religious arena of Jerusalem in a fanfare display of power and authority as a reminder to the Jews that while they may be God's people, Rome was their master. Jews were afraid of revolt at this time of year too. Many, if not most, were comfortable enough with the status quo and didn't want any young upstarts rocking the boat. The Jews enjoyed a relative safety from persecution at the time and were able to hold their religious observances without interference, so long as they continued their obedience to Rome. Rome already had a king. It did not want another. But Jesus clearly had a mission in mind. He was determined to make a public display of his own, and clearly on his own terms. Jesus may have met with a sad ending, but he was in charge of it the whole time. He understood the potential consequences of his actions and leaned into them rather than retreat. About how many others in history can we say the same? In fact, many. Thankfully, many. The best of humanity knows exactly what they're doing when they speak uncomfortable truths. The wisest know exactly what apple cart they are upsetting, what money-changing tables they're overturning in the temple, and why they are doing it. They feel compelled, even against the danger of annihilation, to fulfill their mission, like a calling deep inside which must be lived even at the risk of dying. It is impossible that Jesus had on rose-colored glasses about the mission he was fulfilling. He had to know that Rome would not appreciate a message of empowerment among the people. He had to know that being seen as a king of the Jews would be a challenge to the authority of Rome. He had to know that even his own people would be literally terrified at what Rome might do if provoked. Jew though he may have been, the Jewish establishment would not go down with Jesus. They could not afford to be seen agreeing with him. The fist of Roman authority would come down on either one people or one person. Jesus would have known that while he may enjoy the popular vote, the real power was with the few who were not about to risk losing it. Entering the city in the manner he did was effectively signing his own death warrant. As Jesus entered the city in the east on a donkey he had sent ahead for, knowing it would be there, Pontius Pilate was also entering the city, but from the west. A deeply symbolic slap in the face of Roman authority. Jesus was effectively compelling all Jerusalem to turn the other cheek, to turn away from Rome and toward a new way of being. Look to the east. Even those who were afraid could not help but to turn and look. At the very moment when Rome needed all eyes on its own might and power, few were looking. 2 kings entered the city at the same time that day, but as has been the case so often in history, only one would emerge. On his entry into the city, the Gospel of Matthew suggests that Jesus evoked great excitement. He writes that, quote, all the city was moved, close quote. In today's understanding, that word moved sounds like more of a deeply emotional response, to be quietly moved in awe. But that interpretation would be a mistake. The word moved used by Matthew in the Greek text is asiste. I said that, yeah. Which is derived from the Greek word seismos, which means earthquake. The Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges suggests the word in the original is forcible, convulsed, or stirred as by an earthquake or by a violent wind. Later, Matthew uses the same word again when he suggests that the earth quaked at the time of Jesus' death. His entrance to the city is no small matter. He makes an earthquake of his presence. It is done at the worst possible time and with the greatest degree of mockery capable against Rome. As Pontius Pilate entered the west gate on a high stallion with his soldiers in gleaming metal, Jesus entered through the east on a lowly donkey with his people. It reads like a political skit on Saturday Night Live. Jesus knew his time was coming. He knew that he was spreading a dangerous and seditious message among his people and claimed an authority far higher than Rome's. What did it feel like to know he was walking into a trap he himself created? Did Pontius Pilate know he was being manipulated into taking an action? Did the Jewish Sanhedrin know that they were being painted into a theological corner by a mind sharper than theirs? Jesus was the puppet master of Jerusalem that week. Even the apocryphal Gospel of Judas claims that Jesus actually asked Judas to betray him so that all could be brought to bear. Could that be true? It may be. Does wondering that change anything? Does it take God out of the picture? Is it an insult to those who believe that the purpose of it all was to save the world from its sins through the resurrection of Jesus' physical body? Is it a sacrilege to wonder? I don't think so. We can't know what occurred on the celestial level as a result of Jesus' deliberate earthly sacrifice for the sake of an idea. Whether or not the world was to enter back into God's good graces again is an idea beyond our knowing, beyond our ability to even debate. It can sit on the sidelines for now, respectful but mysterious. Let us instead look to the human Jesus, the one we can touch and ask questions, the one we are encouraged to emulate in our actions. What would Jesus do? Well, what would he do? In the face of deep societal difficulty, he would have courage. He would speak the difficult truth. He would expose the lies by adroitly letting the liars hang themselves with their own words. He would teach us all how much power we really have and then show us how to use it. He would teach us how to get under the skin of the bird of tyranny and watch it tweet itself into extinction. There is a way forward into the city. It is love. It is courage. It is even satire. It is going to the gallows knowing that death is not an end. It is merely change. It is a transformation by fire. When we embark on that journey deliberately, when we knowingly climb that gangplank on a doomed ship, knowing that it will be hard, harder than hard, potentially disastrous, there is a purpose to that sacrifice. But of that fire, a phoenix will emerge. Hope. The prophets of today are not always crucified anymore. That is a good sign. There are islands of hope and progress which grow and connect. The world has changed, largely in part to the masters who have shared their vision of the future of this world with us. They have left a legacy in our hands we are compelled to fulfill. Peace on earth is not won in a day, but in an age. It is begun violently like a knife being pulled from a wound. But the wound will heal. The scar will form. And it will be among the strongest parts of our body ever after. Be at ease now and breathe. Feel the breath flooding your body. Perceive it as water moving through you softening all it touches, relaxing all it overtakes. As you breathe, I bring a thought before you about entrances. The entrance is the preparation. It is the pronouncement. It is climbing up the ladder on the high dive. It is the application for a new job. There is a constellation to moments like these. All circumstances surrounding the moment influence the outcome. Few to none can be altered. The only thing over which we have any control at all is timing and attitude, when we do it, and how we feel about it. Those questions are answered only if we know what we want to achieve. Only if we know the vision can we determine the mission. Only when we know how we hope things will end up can we decide how to proceed. And then we must proceed faithfully. Things will not always go as planned. But if we are solid in our vision, we will ultimately succeed. But first we must begin. First we must make an entrance. Take the first step. As we contemplate these thoughts, orient your hearts now to the east, to where the sun rises. We are the children of that place in so many ways. And so with thoughts about how you shall arrive at the next chapter of your life, the next story of your existence, take one final breath and return.